Hello and welcome everyone to a special Tech Tuesday webinar. Today we're going to take a look at a couple of new camera introductions recently announced at the ISE show. These cameras incorporate Sony's unique AI technology that enable an amazing auto framing functionality. I'm recording this today because I'm actually at the NSCA Business Leadership Conference where I hope to meet many of you in person. So after an introduction from Drew Buttress, Chrissy Sarah will run us through the camera with a demonstration of all its unique features and functions. And then we'll turn it back over to Drew and Ken, where they'll take your questions and have some time for Q&A. As with all of our Tech Tuesday webinars, relevant information will be posted in the chat. We'll also post a link to all of our archived Tech Tuesday webinars, and we encourage you to please submit your questions via the question panel. So joining me now will be Drew Buttress, Senior Product Manager, and Ken Kobayashi, Commercialization Manager for Sony's Imaging and Analytics Solutions. We'll also be joined by Chrissy Sarah, Senior Sales Support Engineer for the Central Zone. So I'll turn it over to Drew now. I'll see you back here in a couple of weeks, and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, John. Hey, before we, first of all, let me welcome everybody who's joined this Tech Tuesday telecast, and Ken, thank you for joining me as well. Before we get into the real techie talk, let's take a look at a preview video showing what this camera can do. Chris?
Hey, I just watched a lecture from last week. Did you get better at filming?
Oh, actually,
I am so excited for today's guest speaker. Can't wait to watch it later.
Today, I'm more than just this school's coolest professor. I'm a professional camera woman with the Sony SRG-A40 and SRG-A12.
With PTZ auto framing based on AI analytics, you can capture video of presentations like never before.
Let's go for a wide shot. Pull back, pan to the left. Yes, awesome.
PTZ auto framing with AI analytics provides hands-free video shooting ability. How? The SRG-A40 and SRG-A12 are equipped with Sony's newly developed built-in advanced AI analytics. AI analytics technology detects the subject's skeleton. This enables really useful auto tracking and auto framing. And it keeps suitable size in the frame all on its own. Even if your subject is moving quickly, AI analytics can track it with ease and dexterity, so you never miss a moment you'd lose with conventional automatic shooting. Keep framing even in side shots.
Earning that paycheck.
SRG-A40 and SRG-A12 never miss close-up shots that conventional automatic shooting wouldn't capture.
Wow, this is incredible.
Even when people are crossing, by predicting the target's movement and detecting the color and pattern of clothing with deep learning, the camera continues tracking the subject. The face recognition function allows the camera to start tracking again, even if the target person disappears from the screen. AI-powered algorithms ensure natural and smooth automatic camera work, so it doesn't generate meaningless camera work. You can pick from 3 different sizes: full body, waist, and close-up. All you need to do is just a few steps with Web App. Shooting redefined. AI makes you free. PTZ auto framing camera with AI analytics, SRG-A40 and SRG-A12.
This is amazing. How are you doing this?
All right. Well, great video. Let's talk a little bit about where these two new cameras fit. This is a chart showing all of our Sony's 4K cameras. The A40 and the A12 are 4K out of the box. We still offer the SRG X series, which are 4K upgradable. The two box cameras down in the lower left corner are 4K 60p. The PTZs are all 4K 30p. And then part of our product lineup that Ken and I kind of handle together is the REA C1000 Edge Analytics Vision Presenter kind of thing. And then our beamforming microphone, as well as our remote control panels. So moving forward, as I said, it's 4K 30p. We do have clear image zoom that I'm going to talk about. So the SRG-A40 is 20 times optical zoom if you are in a 4K format. Clear image zoom will extend that to 30 times. And if you're in a full HD or an HD format, we would then extend that to 40 times clear image zoom. And then there is a 2x tele mode on the SRG-A40 that I will get to. On the SRG-A12, it is a 12 times optical zoom camera. There is no clear image zoom behind it. Both of them, though, have that built-in auto framing capability, and we're going to get to that, obviously. Some of the applications, the obvious one to me is in education. You're going to have a presenter. You want to not only track them, but then frame them. As the video showed, it was all hands-free. House of worship, clearly an opportunity there for the corporate world, where you've got an auditorium or a big enough boardroom where you want to follow a presenter, etc. So you can see the different applications the camera would be suitable for. Some of the key features, obviously, the one we're talking about the most right now is the PTZ auto framing. But then, in addition, outstanding image quality. Sony is known for its imagers and its image quality. And again, this camera is not lacking in the picture quality. Also, flexible installation and an easy setup. Some of the features, again, the idea here is it's really hands-free shooting. You don't need that external operator trying to follow a presenter as they move about. What we're really doing here is we are not only tracking him left and right, but we will control the tilt and the zoom movement, which I'll get into a little bit. But the idea would be, in a typical PTZ auto tracking application, where you may be just pan tracking. If the presenter moves towards the camera, they get larger in the frame. If they move away from the camera, they get smaller in the frame. And with the new AI built into this camera, or these two cameras, what we're able to do is actually adjust that zoom and adjust the tilt so that we keep the person in frame. The other thing is we can detect that person even if they are wearing a mask, and then we're tracking them with a number of different algorithms, both the skeletal, and then you heard with color, with pattern, in the clothes they're wearing. So again, what we're really doing is regardless of the presenter's posture or what they're wearing, we're actually able to continually track them. And if we lose sight of them, the deep learning that you heard is really we now know which face, regardless of whether they have a mask on or not, and we will pick that person back up and start tracking again. The big advantage to our auto framing camera is we give you 3 different shots, 3 different views. So you could have full body, where you would follow them on, in the front of the room or on a stage. Or if you prefer, we can go to what we call a waist shot. It's, midriff up, and then a close up, which would be a head shoulder shot. And we can track, this is part of the setup that you would select ahead of time. We can certainly change that on the fly, but we'll get to that later too. So with full body, the big advantage here is we try to keep the subject in the center of the frame, as opposed to the conventional auto tracking, where you may need to trigger the camera movement, meaning the subject moves into the left third of the frame or the right third of the frame, and then we continually move the camera from there. With the SRG-A40 and A12, what we're really doing is we're going to keep that subject centered in the frame as they move in real time. Again, with the waist up, the big advantage that we have is we're not going to get confused if there are other people, whether we walk behind them or the presenter walks in front of them or behind them. We're going to continually follow that presenter that was originally detected. And then finally on the close-up, you know, our competitors are a little more limited. They may only have 2 views. We certainly can offer the 3 different views. The big advantage here is once you've gone through that web app that was mentioned in the video and set up these parameters, like what shot you want, there's some other adjustments that we'll explain in a minute. But once you turn on, you know, basically once you start the application, the camera's going to run. You don't need to be connected to that web app anymore. The camera's just going to run based on those parameters you've set. And so it'll automatically start. It'll be looking in a detection zone. Once we pick up a person in that detection zone, we begin tracking. The other nice thing about this camera is it offers a tally lamp. And while it's a small LED, it at least lets the presenter know I am being tracked. So they get some visual feedback from the camera. So as I mentioned, there's the 3 sizes. There's the full body, there's the waist up, and then the close up. But in addition, you can set what the height is, you know, how much space above the presenter's head you want in the frame. So you can adjust the framing based on the kind of shot you want to get. The other big advantage is we can actually left justify and right justify the person in the frame. So if it's a presenter who's going to be up at a whiteboard, we can get more of the whiteboard because they're not centered in the frame. They could be left justified or right justified. The big advantage over conventional auto tracking, if you're using our camera with the REA-C1000 for PTZ auto tracking, what we're really doing is we are pan tracking. So it's basically just that left and right movement. And again, if the subject moves towards the camera, they're going to become larger in the frame, but Edge isn't adjusting the camera zoom. And so, you know, now they aren't framed quite the same. You know, their aspect ratio changes. Whereas with the built-in analytics, we're actually adjusting the tilt as well as zoom, and we keep that person in frame, you know, as they move about. So this reduces your install cost because you don't need the external device. You don't need a computer running external software. Everything's built into the camera. And we're going to get into some of the advantages shortly as to how we can connect that. So now I'm going to throw it over to Chrissy Sarah for a demo.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, everyone. My name's Chrissy Sarah. I'm a senior sales support engineer for our central zone, and I get the opportunity to show you our new camera. I also am going to give you a live demo, but first, let me give you a walk through the GUI. All right. So what you're seeing first is the Live tab. When you first log on to your camera, you will actually see the Live tab first, then you'll see the PTZ Auto Frame tab, and then you'll see the Settings tab. So first, I want to go ahead and point out a few things that are on this screen. So of course, you see the confidence or reference monitor of the output of the camera. Down below, you'll see an open bar. That is actually where your presets will appear. And this will allow you to create different presets right off the cuff. You do that by positioning the camera by using this circle. You can also use the arrows. You can also use the zoom and the tele and the width. And then once you found the right area that you want to make a preset, you just simply click it and it will add the preset to the bottom. One way that this is helpful is not only in presets in general, but also in when you're trying to quickly set up your PTZ auto framing settings, and I'll get more to that in a second. So on the right-hand side, we have our autofocus, our manual focus. We also have our audio selection if you do plan to put a mic into the camera. We also have our streaming settings real fast. This actually is set up over here, but this is just kind of a view into that. And then we also have the ability to set English or do a full screen display. And that's pretty cool because that opens up a secondary tab of just a full screen display of your output. Okay, enough with that. Let's get into the fun stuff. So PTZ auto framing settings, you'll open up this tab and you have some language here that you can look at. The first thing is this is your traditional initial setup page. So this means that you first have the opportunity to start out with the limiting range of pan and tilt. If, for instance, you want to cut off the left or the right-hand side of stage, or if you don't want the camera to zoom all the way to the lights on the ceiling or the chairs on the floor, that type of limitation. First, we're going to just kind of ignore that because I don't need to do that in this particular demo. So I'm going to go down to our right-hand side and hit Start. Here, you'll see a very familiar setting that you might have seen before in some of our other GUIs, where we have a close-up, a waist, or full body option. I'm going to choose waist today, and then adjust framing also gives you the same type of framing options you might have seen before, which is simply a height recommendation, a body size recommendation, and a placement. So all of these are set for the recommendation. I'm just going to change this so that you can get an idea of what you're actually seeing. Okay, I like what this is here, so I'm going to move on to the next. Here I am again. This is just to set up your home position of tracking. Now I'm actually going to leave it wide just for the demo, but you can adjust here just like you would see those other adjustments that we had to get to that particular framing that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and move right on. And now we're on page 3. I know that because at the bottom of the page there's 3 and 4, and on the left of that 3, 4 is a back and next. So that's also familiar and typical to our GUIs. And then this area is actually where you're going to set up sort of a detection zone. So let's say you have audience heads maybe at the bottom, or if you have some kind of something that you don't want to track up on top, you can adjust that top and bottom detection zone like so. You can also move it in. So if there's an area where you just absolutely don't want any tracking, you can also do that as well. Basically, anything that's in the blue is what you want to be picked up. Now, if I deselected this, this would give me a manual track option, meaning I can click the face that I only ever want to be detected from the system, or you can go into the automatic target selection, which would just pick up any face that shows up in that blue square. All right, tracking timeout, detection restart, and wait time. Those are all varying different options. You want to go ahead and set those at least 10 seconds or give it more than a variable of 1, just so that you can go ahead and start seeing where that is going to work for you in your demo. So my first option is going to give me kind of a 10-second. Now, of course, we have 0 to 60. Once you actually launch that, I'll show you this really great option that we have to now click through each individual page of setup. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this 10 and then hit my next page. So auto start is the option to auto start the application on startup of camera. I'm just going to go ahead and click that because this is my demo unit and I like to play around with it. I'm going to go ahead and hit done. When I hit done, you know that this is launched because these pages on the left are now white. So we have initial setup, we have framing, we have tracking. This is letting you know that your PTZ auto framing settings is ready to go. Now, how do we get it launched? That's the exciting part. We simply head over to the Live tab, and it opens up the Live tab as you know it. So you'll see our live preview. We'll see the settings on the right, and now we're going to head all the way to the left where it says Start PTZ Auto Framing. When I click that, that launches the application. So when I walk into my framing space, it appropriately frames me per the adjustment framing choices that I selected earlier. And then it also keeps the pan, tilt, and zoom tracking. So in our traditional PTZ tracking, it only does the panning. But in this version, we have the PTZ auto framing, which essentially keeps my framing active, whether I'm walking back and forth, whether I'm sitting or standing. And it also allows for me to get back up, write on my whiteboard, point to my PowerPoint, or even walk towards the camera. So this is something that's been pretty traditionally hard to do, and now we've been able to master it. So when I walk towards the camera, it keeps me framed, and when I walk away from the camera, it keeps me framed. All right, Drew, hope this was helpful. I'll catch you later.
Thanks, Chrissy. Appreciate the demo. Some of the other camera features, right? So we've covered what the auto framing is and what it can do, but let's talk about some of the other features that really make this camera stand out. We're going to talk about the excellent image quality, the zoom. Also, I've already mentioned it's 4K 30p out of the box. So with the image quality, this is about, I think it's an 8.6 megapixel imager, and it's an Exmor R. And in Sony's world, that means it is a back illuminated imager. So traditionally, front illuminated, you were shooting kind of through this layer of metal wirings, the circuitry to read out the actual image that's captured. That is now moved behind the actual photodiode surface, so more light makes us much more sensitive, and we end up with very high quality color reproduction with a lot less noise. Clear image zoom. I love talking about clear image zoom. People hear it and they go, well, that's digital zoom. Everybody has digital zoom. Well, we're not doing digital zoom, right? So we take that 8.6 megapixel image and scale it. So we're not showing you every row and every column. We're also not cropping, but basically we're creating that 4K image or full HD image out of that through the scaler built in the camera. Clear image zoom now brings those rows and columns back into view. And yes, we are cropping to give you a 4K image, but instead of interpolating like digital zoom where we're guessing what the pixels are and very quickly you get out past, I don't know, 5x, 6x digital zoom, the image becomes blocky. And we've all seen it. You've probably seen it using your cell phone. Clear image zoom is not digital zoom, and as a result, we're able to extend in 4K mode out to 30 times, the equivalent of 30 times magnification. And if you're in an HD format, it would now be 40 times. On the SRG-A40, we have what's called 2x tele mode. 2x tele mode actually now does you have to be in an HD format, and it now takes that 1080 by 1024 center cutout of the imager. Basically, if we're starting at 70 degrees wide horizontal field of view, we've basically now cut that in half, meaning your field of view at wide is now 35 degrees, but we've just doubled your zoom past the end of clear image zoom. So now theoretically you're at 80 times clear image zoom. The other big advantage of this camera, we introduced this on the X series. We have a 70-degree wide horizontal field of view, and what that allows is, compared to other cameras, we can bring in more image data when you're in that wide setting. So in this example, you can see where the regular camera had cut off that right hand side. Now we can actually see what was being presented in that screen. The high resolution, we do a very, very good job of giving you clear image data, whether it's text, it's drawings, whatever you're looking at. And obviously the color reproduction is outstanding. Again, this is part of our scaling engine, taking that 8.6 megapixel image and bringing it down to your 4K or full HD. The camera does have what we call a day-night mode, and while you're not likely to be tracking somebody when it's dark, this camera could be used in other applications, like in the medical field. Typically, ICUs, or even in sleep study clinics, you'll have an infrared LED panel. Once they turn off the room lights, it's dark, but with the IR, what we actually do is we remove the IR cut filter out of the optical path, and we put the image into monochrome mode. And with those IR illuminator, any IR light in the room, we're able to pick up a very nice, clean, clear image of the subject. So back earlier in the presentation, I mentioned how easy and flexible the installation is. These cameras are NDI HX ready, meaning you would need an optional license that's purchased separately. But once you've got NDI installed, there's a ton of possibilities what you can do with that. Um, Basically, with it being PoE++, you would have a single cable installation where your control, your video, your power, it's all going over a single Cat 5e, Cat 6. Moving on. So in our older cameras, traditionally you would have a power cable, you would have a cable for your image, your video and audio, like an HDMI or some other, and then you would have some form of a camera control cable. As I mentioned, now with it being PoE++, you could literally just do everything you need to with a single cable, hence really simplifying your install and reducing your install costs. For remote viewing, the camera will stream RTSP, SRT, and if you've installed the optional NDI license, you would then have NDI HX at your disposal. Some of the other features, again, there's a tally lamp. So when a presenter or person is being actively tracked, that tally light goes on. We have a feature we're going to get to here in another slide where once you've set up one camera, you can easily replicate those settings on multiple cameras. We're going to talk about, the improvements to our pan tilt movement, as well as a feature called Picture Freeze Preset. And we'll get to that in a sec. So again, you can set up one camera. You set up its exposure, its white balance, all of that. Export those settings to a laptop or PC that's connected, and then from there import it into the additional cameras, so that it really saves you from having to go into the cameras menus, change settings. You just import that file to the other cameras and they'll all be set up the same. So one of the big improvements we had with the X series PTZ cameras, we've brought into the A series, and that is we've increased the maximum panning speed from 100 degrees per second to 300 degrees per second. The camera can pan 340 degrees. So from center, it would be plus or minus 170 degrees. At 100 degrees per second, I could go from far left to far right in a little over 3 seconds. Well, now I'm doing it in just barely over a second. Now, with that comes the potential for blur. If I'm just moving the camera that fast, the video is not going to be very pleasing. So we have another feature called Picture Freeze Preset. And in here, what we do is when this is enabled, when we do a preset recall, we freeze on the last frame, move the camera, and then turn the video back on. So that way you don't get that big smear or blur as we move at that top speed of 300 degrees per second. In the past, cameras would do a preset move in 2 steps. We would do the pan tilt followed by the zoom. What we've now done is we've added in a feature called PTZ Motion Sync. So we're turning on all 3 motors at the same time. We want to get from, in this case, point A to point E. We're moving all the motors from the same starting point. Ideally, the goal would be to end at the same point, but I'll be honest, if we are doing a very big pan move and not a lot of zoom move, well, the zoom motor is gonna finish, right? I can't run the zoom motor that slow. for a small amount of zoom change when you're doing a very long, pan motion. Another thing, we have a free software download on our website. It's called Virtual Webcam Driver. This works with our REAC 1000. It works obviously with the new A40 and SRG-A12. The virtual webcam driver allows it takes the RTSP feed from the camera, and when you've installed this on, let's say, a room PC, or in a conference room, and you want to connect this camera, um, the driver basically makes it look like a USB feed into things, UC applications like Zoom, MS Teams, WebEx. Um, you could connect up to 5 different devices using the webcam driver, and then from there, if we're doing a Zoom call or an MS Teams call, um, your camera, although it doesn't have USB, it now looks like a USB video feed into that UC application. And here's an example of Sony's able to provide an entire solution for the room. In this case, we've got our IP beamforming mics, which are Dante based. If you run it through a Dante mixer, get your audio, everything's network connected. And then in the room PC, you would have the virtual webcam driver running to bring in your video feed, and then you could run the Dante virtual sound card to bring in the audio, and then from there connect into your UC system, and you're able to broadcast to whatever your audience might be. So here are some of the specs. This is kind of an eye chart. I'm not going to read it to you. But basically, as I said, we are PoE++, and unlike our previous models where we ship with a 12-volt DC supply, we're now going to be shipping these 2 new cameras with a 19.5. Just because of the graphics processor, they are drawing a bit more power. And with that, I am going to start our Q&A. So first question, Manuel asks, how does it handle a group of 2 to 4 as presenters? So in the auto mode, the first person we detect in the detection zone, we're going to be tracking that person, but that's auto mode. There is a manual mode where you would need an external operator, if you will. The camera is not in auto mode. What would happen is in the web UI, you would see, let's say, the 2 to 4 presenters, and they would have boxes. If you click on any one of those boxes, that's who we are now going to track. Okay, so it would be manual, kind of a manual override, right? Steven asks, are there any plans in the future to incorporate this technology into larger sensor cameras like the X1000 or the newer FR7? I don't believe there's any plans at all for adding this into something like the BRC X1000. I know there are plans to add the support of the FR7 to our Edge analytics presenter, the REAC 1000. I honestly, that's a production kind of camera, and that's not in my wheelhouse, so I couldn't answer. There could be plans, but at this point, all I'm aware of is they're adding the support to do the auto tracking using the REAC 1000 appliance. Brian is asking what imager is in the A40. Well, it's the same optical blocks that are in our SRG-X400 and in the SRG-X120. I honestly don't know what the imager model number is, but we can get that to you, Brian, if it's important. Kevin asks, does the pan tilt track diagonally smoothly? Yeah, that's the thing that blew me away on the initial samples that Ken and I received when we were demoing this. It absolutely will follow somebody. Um, and like has already been mentioned, that if they move closer to the camera, we basically kind of zoom out, right? We want to keep them in the same aspect ratio relative to the frame setup that you had supplied. Can you track multiple presenters? I've kind of answered that, Patrick, but thanks for the question. Again, in auto mode, we're going to track the first person, and the real strength of our framing solution is that we don't get confused with others. You would need to be um, in that manual mode so that some external operator would be able to switch who on the stage or at the front of room is being tracked. David asks, Sony Edge offering does the Edge does great features with cameras. Are any of the features you're describing for um, the A40 or A12 for Edge to work? Well, Edge just needs for auto tracking. Edge just needs a Sony PTZ that outputs HDMI video and can be controlled using our Visca over IP protocol. You wouldn't necessarily need Edge. Um, if you're going to go with the auto framing, you certainly wouldn't need Edge at all. Edge does those other applications like handwriting extraction and chroma keyless overlays. There you still wouldn't need an auto framing camera um, to connect to that, but anyhow. Is there any current or planned capability to allow automated switching between multiple cameras? Not on the Sony side. If you're using one of those third-party controllers and one of their matrix switches, you could have multiple cameras working, but Sony wouldn't be providing you with that control software to automatically switch between, a left, center, or right camera. Brian, this is a great question from Brian. He says, what if you pan over to a monitor and there's a face there? What happens? Actually, when Chrissy did the demo, she showed you that blue zone in one of the setup screens, and you can actually adjust, the bottom up or the top down. And what you would do is you would actually set it so that we would not falsely start tracking somebody's face that's in a monitor. Let's see. Tony actually is asking two questions, and I'm going to throw this over to Ken. This is a business question. What is the expected price point of these new models, and when will Sony begin shipping?
Yep. Thank you, Drew. It's my part. Now we are planning to have $3,000 US dollar MSRP for SRG-A40 and 2,500 MSRP for A12. And we are planning to ship these two models from end of October. So most likely US customers will receive these models in early September. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. A couple of more questions here. So David is asking, he has a great compliment. It says lots of great auto functions, but it goes, can a remote viewer control the camera? And he's got a great example here where he's saying, hey, I want to view a machine on a factory floor that's in another country. Well, if they have the IP address and they know the username and password, you're able to log into the web UI. You could take control take over manual control of the camera. So if you wanted to zoom in, you wanted to move and look at a different part of the factory floor, you'd certainly be able to do that. Um, that that video, if they are connected using our virtual webcam driver, then to answer the last part of your question, they would be able to feed that video that they're manually controlling. They would be able to feed that video through the virtual webcam driver into, say, MS Teams. Patrick has a question. Does the virtual webcam driver support connecting multiple cameras to a PC simultaneously? Zoom Room supports streaming of multiple camera feeds. Um, yeah, I'm not a Zoom user, so I can't answer the Zoom part of that. But you can connect up to 5 different video sources. Sony's streaming cameras, you're able to connect those through the virtual webcam driver. So if Zoom can break it down into 5 different feeds, typically as an individual user on Teams and what little I've done on Zoom, I can only pick one camera. Um, and that would be, in this case, I would be picking, it would say Sony Cam 1 or however they labeled it. I would connect to that feed, and that becomes my video feed into that call. Tom asks RTMP. This camera does not have RTMP. We do have RTMPS on our SRG-X series PTZ cameras. Right now, what we are getting is RTSP, SRT, and then of course you've got your NDI HX. Chase has a question. How does this camera handle the changeover from one presenter to another? Can it do this automatically? If you're in the auto mode, then what would happen is we would have to lose sight of whoever was originally detected and we're tracking. Um, One of the timeouts Chrissy mentioned would be, okay, when do we go back to the detection zone? So if there's a new presenter, they would have to go to the detection zone, get detected, and then we would be able to follow them. But you have to understand that when you're in this auto mode, we're trying to follow that first person detected. And um, so that, you know, you can create a short timeout, boom, the counter goes off, we go back to the detection zone, and now your next presenter could be detected wherever that spot is for the detection. Jeff asks, is there a way to automate the start of tracking for a Zoom room using the native controls or another method? I'm not sure, Jeff, what you mean by the native controls. With our virtual webcam driver, we're really just ingesting the video. It's not like a USB camera where you would have far end camera control. In other words, person on the other end of the call viewing my video can't adjust my framing, um, you know, through those types of camera controls. Can we have 3 cameras in one auditorium tracking the presenters and students asking questions? Well, that answer's certainly yes. We could have multiple cameras. You could have 2 at the back, 1 in the front facing the audience. The only issue there is when a student asks the question, then you would need somebody to manually move, you know, pan and tilt the camera to pick up that speaker. Now, if you were using a non-tracking camera and the REAC 1000, we have an application on there called Close Up by Gesture. So if you want to, in this case, let's say we've got a 4K shot of the entire audience, somebody stands up to ask the question. That's the gesture that triggers, and what happens is the edge changes the video from that wide shot, 4K shot, to a tighter HD shot on the person, and once they sit back down, we go automatically back to the wide shot. So we are going to capture all these questions. I don't know that we have time to get to everybody. It's great, the interest level. There's been a ton of questions. Adam is asking, will the control software be available for download so the camera can be controlled by a standard laptop that is not connected to the internet? No. The setup and everything is done through the web app, or what I call a web UI. Um, you would you would have to be able to get to the IP address of the camera to go in and change that. We are going to offer a what we call a CGI library. So if you're using a third-party control system, the likes of Crestron and Extron, you would be able to program some of these controls. Probably, the obvious basic ones like start tracking or stop tracking. You would be able to do that through these CGI commands. And so Tim has a couple of questions. It goes, is the deep learning functionality dynamic? I'm pretty sure it is, because you saw in the intro video roll where the presenter had gone back behind a whiteboard, and then we immediately started tracking that person again. So we obviously hadn't hit the timeout to have lost the trackee, if you will. So that learning happens. He also asks, does it remember faces and learn movements of individuals? We're not really learning movements. I think what we do is we do learn the face of whoever we detected. But it's not like that person's face is now stored for future reference. Okay. Well, with that, let's go back. Where did my clicker go? So again, thank you, everybody. Your questions will be answered by myself or by Ken once we collect all those. As a reminder, we have another Tech Tuesday. It'll be on March the 14th. And we're going to be addressing sustainability and how it is important in the AV field. So thank you again, John, Ken, Chrissy, for your help on this presentation. I wish everybody a great rest of the week, and stay well.